How delighted I am to be here as somebody who grew up in the Freedom Association and spent many summer holidays working for them as a student. I always feel when I come here that I am coming home. And Simon was very kind about us, but actually I think he is definitely one of the most decent men in British politics and on the right of British politics as well.
Yeah.
Now, I have great respect for Roger. But I don't agree with him on everything. Now, I believe him to be a very generous man, but on this occasion I think he has been somewhat uncharitable, and I'm going to go through a few things with you to explain why. Now, let's just look at where we are. The truth is, we did not win the general election. Now, we can argue why we didn't win the general election. We can argue that till the cows come home, but the reality is we did not, and we did not get a majority. And I have one view in life which is very simple. I would rather have a 60-70% Conservative government than 100% Gordon Brown Labour government. In fact, I would go further. I would rather have a 1% Conservative government than a 100% Gordon Brown Labour government. What is all the more amazing, given that we don't have a majority, we are actually doing some incredibly right-wing things. Into Cardiff, I saw a big union sign saying against the cuts. The political impetus against the programme to reform the economy to stop us paying £120 million a day in debt interest alone is enormous. Look what happened when we tried to sort out the forests, for example. So to actually take on the economy, and by the way, one of the biggest lies is that we are cutting spending. We are not cutting spending. All we are doing is cutting the rate of growth of spending. And yet we have allowed ourselves to let the opposition, the Labour and the union movement, to say we are cutting spending. But what we are doing is getting the deficit under control, because if we don't deal with the structural deficit, our country will go bankrupt. Simple as that. Seeing George Osborne today and seeing what he's had the courage to do, and given that we are in an alliance with Liberal Democrats, who are on the progressive left, who spent the last 10, 20 years going on about more spending and so on, it is incredible, absolutely incredible when you look at the details of what he has achieved. You look at what Ian Duncan Smith has been doing. People have been talking about reforming welfare for years. Blair even talked about it when he got in. Thatcher, dare I say it, was not brave enough to take on the welfare state. She did a lot of fantastic things, and I came into politics because of Mrs. Thatcher, but she did not take on the welfare state. And look at what Ian Duncan Smith is doing. He is reforming it in a way and changing the benefit system so we no longer have a culture of dependency. We no longer have a universalist culture, but we move to a thing where we actually give people ladders and trampolines rather than just giving handouts. Look at students. I mean, Roger was very, again, I say uncharitable about the students. Look at the opposition there was, just bringing in a fair student fees at the universities. Now, if you look at my constituency, where a lot of people don't go to university, people work hard and save hard, why should people on low incomes pay for students who go to universities and get fancy jobs at the end of it? Now, one of the big weaknesses of Conservative parties in the past was that we never ever fought the cultural battle. We always fought the economic battle, free markets, against the unions, against communism. We never fought the cultural battle. And what that meant was that the left were prevalent in our universities, in our schools. And because we never took on the cultural battle, it meant the left were winning the battle of ideas. But look at how our schools have achieved 33 or 34%, a third of our children leave school being unable to read, being unable to count. We're giving people free schools, giving them the chance to set up schools in their neighbourhoods. Academies. Who will need the NUT then? Because the schools will be run themselves and they won't be tied to a nationwide union agreement. Again, this is a coalition government that is doing this. Now, I'll come on to the big society. Before any of you laugh and say, oh, it's all a load of waffle, I take totally the opposite view. I think the big society is one of the most important things we do in government because it changes the nature of our relationship between the state and the citizen. The big society says that social capital, the glue that binds communities together, and I am a community conservative, The glue that binds people, communities together is as important as economic capital. They have to go hand in hand. And the big society says people power is as important as state power. That means giving people the power to have referendums on excessive council tax, choosing their own kind of police commissioner for their neighbourhood. So, as I said, setting up free schools, giving real people the power to change things. And the big society says that social entrepreneurs, the people who runs our voluntary groups, our charities, our neighbourhoods, are as important as economic entrepreneurs because they provide the social capital that keeps our communities together. And they should have all the burdens and obstacles and regulations lifted off them, just as we should lift off the burdens and regulations and obstacles we take away from economic entrepreneurs. We come on to something which I thought was quite incredible that David Cameron did only 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now, I know I'm going to sound like a Notting Hill groupie here, but I assure you, I have only been there once. It was 3 years ago, and I went to a steak restaurant, and I only found out recently that that restaurant had closed. So I'm not a Notting Hill groupie. But how many of you saw the Munich speech David Cameron made on Islamism? Now that was, I think, the most important speech that our Prime Minister has ever done. Because he was saying the way we have dealt with multiculturalism in this country has been wrong. The way we have dealt with extreme Islamism, I'm not talking about moderate Islam, but extreme Islamists, has been wrong. And we need to take on the extreme Islamists in our mosques, in our universities, and extremist groups. Yeah. And for the Prime Minister to do that in Munich, to make that counterintuitive speech, I think was quite remarkable and deserves a lot of credit. And that was a very, very conservative speech. And I think will have profound implications on policy as we go ahead. On Europe, it hasn't all been hunky-dory. Of course, I'm a Eurosceptic. I've rebelled against the government once, twice, but once was an official whip. And that was on the EU budget, because I thought that it was wrong that we should vote for an increase in the EU budget when we're cutting spending everywhere else. The people who created the European Convention of Human Rights were very noble people. That was created out of the ashes of Nazi Germany. And I said in the House of Commons at the time, in the debate, that those people who created the ECHR created it because they didn't want the concentration camps to happen again. And I can guarantee to you, they would never, ever, ever have given Rudolf Hess and Albert Speer the vote, those two Nazis who served their time in prison. To risk a lynching here, because I'm going to say something nice about Liberal Democrats. And just hold on a moment. I have fought Liberal Democrats and I fought Labour people as a candidate, and I know what they're like on the ground. But who were the people who also wanted to get rid of identity cards as well as us? It was Liberal Democrats. Who were the people who campaigned for lower taxes for lower earners, for raising the threshold for lower earners? It was the Liberal Democrats. And I'll tell you something, if we'd have had that in our manifesto, this time round, perhaps we would have won a full majority in the House of Commons, because the first thing we did as part of the coalition agreement was implement Liberal Democrat policy on lower taxes for lower earners, something I fundamentally agree with. But people in my constituency are crying out for lower taxes, and that should be our priority, because it emphasises that cutting taxes is a moral creed. And if we cut taxes for lower earners, we're showing ourselves to be a moral party. And something else I have to praise the Liberal Democrats for. What was Liberal Democrat policy at the last election in their manifesto? It was to get rid of these ridiculous strategic health authorities and all the NHS bureaucracy. It wasn't our policy. We come in and that's part of the policy. We're getting rid of these unnecessary bureaucracies, saving a fortune in the place. So there's not all, in terms of policy, it's different on the ground, yes, but it's not all bad in the coalition garden.